Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! As the dawn light filtered through the kitchen window, a familiar routine ensued. The man, unassuming in his morning haze, took a sip from his daily brew, an expectant peace momentarily settling within him. But as the warm liquid touched his taste buds, a peculiar sensation emerged. A bitterness, almost foreign, lingered like a bitter memory. Wrinkling his nose, he swallowed, finding little comfort in the aftertaste. A voice, casual and warm, interrupted his contemplation.
"Everything all right with your coffee this morning?"
With a slight shrug, he replied,
"It's peculiar. Different somehow. Same stuff as always, James. Maybe your taste buds are evolving."
James shrugged and stood up, gathering his things for work. The navy blue suit he wore felt slightly tighter around the waist than it had the month before, but he attributed it to too many late-night pizza orders and not enough gym time. At 32, metabolism wasn't the ally it once had been.
"I'm heading out. Don't forget it's your turn to grab groceries this week,"
James called over his shoulder as he headed for the door.
"Sure thing,"
Marcus replied, watching his roommate leave with an expression that might have worried James had he turned to see it. The morning commute was uneventful, but by midday, James noticed the strange mood swings that had been plaguing him recently. One moment he was fine, the next he felt on the verge of tears over a mildly critical email from his supervisor. These emotional fluctuations had been increasing over the past few weeks, along with other subtle changes he couldn't quite put his finger on. Sitting at his desk, he ran a hand through his short blonde hair and tried to focus on the spreadsheet in front of him. The numbers blurred slightly as fatigue settled in. Another new development. He'd been sleeping more, yet feeling less rested.
"You okay?"
His coworker Donna asked, peering over the cubicle divider.
"You look a little pale."
"I'm fine," James answered automatically. "Just tired." "You've been saying that a lot lately," she observed. "Maybe you should see a doctor." Maybe he should, but what would he say? That his emotions were all over the place? That his chest felt tender when he buttoned his shirt this morning? That sometimes he caught his reflection and didn't quite recognize himself? The workday dragged on, and by the time James returned to the apartment, Marcus was already home, sprawled on the couch watching television.
"There's leftover Chinese in the fridge,"
Marcus offered, not looking away from the screen.
"Thanks,"
James mumbled, but instead of heading to the kitchen, he went straight to his bedroom. Shrugging off his suit jacket, he unbuttoned his shirt and paused at the mirror. Was it his imagination, or was his chest different? There seemed to be a slight swelling beneath his nipples, which had been increasingly sensitive. Frowning, he turned sideways. His waist definitely seemed narrower, his hips slightly wider. These changes were subtle. No one else would notice. But to James, they were becoming impossible to ignore. That night, sleep came fitfully, his dreams filled with confusion and shifting perspectives. The pattern continued for another month. Each morning, James drank the bitter coffee Marcus prepared. Each day, the changes became more pronounced. His blonde hair, which he'd neglected to cut, grew past his ears, softening the angles of his face. His body hair thinned noticeably. The emotional roller coaster intensified. Commercials about family reunions brought tears to his eyes. Small gestures of kindness from strangers made his heart swell. Marcus watched it all with quiet interest, occasionally asking seemingly innocent questions about how James was feeling.
"You look different,"
Marcus commented one evening.
"Have you lost weight?"
James glanced up from his dinner.
"Some, I think, but it's weird. My clothes still don't fit right." "Different distribution, maybe,"
Marcus suggested, taking a sip of his beer.
"Bodies change as we get older."
Not like this, James thought, but didn't say. The turning point came exactly 7 weeks after the coffee first started tasting strange. James woke up on a Saturday morning and couldn't button his dress shirt across his chest. The tender swelling had become unmistakable. Small but definite breasts had formed. Panic rose in his throat as he stared at his reflection. This wasn't normal. This couldn't be explained away as stress or poor diet or aging. Something was happening to his body that defied rational explanation. With trembling hands, he searched his symptoms online. The results sent a chill down his spine. Many matched the effects of estrogen hormone therapy. But that was impossible. He wasn't taking hormones. Unless... the bitter coffee. Marcus preparing it every morning with that strange smile. The timing aligned perfectly. James burst out of his room, still shirtless, confrontation on his mind, but stopped short. The apartment was empty. A note on the kitchen counter informed him that Marcus had left for a weekend trip to visit family and wouldn't be back until Monday. Alone with his discovery, James paced the apartment. He should call the police. He should go to the hospital. He should... What? Tell them his roommate had been secretly dosing him with female hormones. Would they even believe him? And the changes? Could they be reversed at this point? His racing thoughts were interrupted by a notification on his phone. A delivery had arrived. He'd forgotten ordering new clothes online after noticing his old ones weren't fitting properly. With numb detachment, he collected the package from the lobby and returned to his apartment. The delivery contained jeans and shirts in a slightly smaller size, which he'd ordered hoping they would accommodate his changing physique. But as he tried them on, he realized even these didn't quite fit right. The jeans hugged his newly curved hips, but gaped at the waist. The shirts strained slightly across his chest. Standing in front of the mirror in ill-fitting clothes, James made a decision. If he was going to understand what was happening to his body, he needed clothes that actually fit, and that meant acknowledging the changes rather than fighting them. With a strange sense of calm that belied the turmoil inside, he grabbed his keys and wallet and headed to the mall. The women's department loomed before him, intimidating and foreign. He hesitated at its periphery, gathering courage.
"Can I help you find something?"
A sales associate approached with a professional smile.
"I'm shopping for..."
James faltered. The associate waited patiently, her expression neutral.
"I need some clothes that fit my current body shape," he finally managed. "And maybe a bra."
If the associate was surprised, she didn't show it. "Of course. Let's start with getting your measurements, and we can go from there." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of fitting rooms, tactful suggestions, and growing acceptance. James emerged from the mall with bags containing women's jeans that accommodated his new curves, blouses that didn't strain across his chest, and 2 practical bras that the associate assured him would provide comfortable support. Back in the privacy of his apartment, James laid out his purchases on the bed. This was madness, right? He should be furious. He should be plotting revenge against Marcus. Instead, he found himself curious. What would these clothes look like on his changing body? With careful movements, he put on one of the bras, a simple beige one with minimal padding, The relief was immediate, the tender tissue supported rather than rubbed raw against fabric. He slipped on a pale blue blouse and the women's jeans. Looking in the mirror, he froze. The person staring back wasn't quite James anymore, but wasn't a stranger either. The softened jawline, the slight swell of chest beneath the blouse, the curve of hip, they came together to create an image that was undeniably feminine, yet retained elements of his former self. Most startling was how natural it looked. There was no sense of disguise or costume, just a body in clothes that fit it properly. That evening, alone in the apartment, James opened his laptop and began researching in earnest. The effects of estrogen, the timeline of physical changes, the psychological impacts. The more he read, the clearer it became that what had happened to him wasn't random. It was a calculated chemical intervention. He should be horrified. He should be planning his confrontation with Marcus. He should be consulting lawyers. Instead, he found himself opening another tab and searching for growing out short hair into feminine styles. By Sunday evening, he'd watched countless tutorials on makeup application, voice feminization, and women's fashion basics. He'd ordered more clothes online, including a floral sundress that had caught his eye. He'd even practiced walking differently, focusing on a smoother gait. The obvious question, why am I embracing this instead of fighting it, hovered at the edges of his consciousness, but he wasn't ready to examine it directly. Monday morning arrived, and with it, Marcus's return. James had prepared himself for this moment, practicing what he would say, how he would remain calm as he confronted his roommate about the violation. But when Marcus walked through the door and saw James sitting at the kitchen table, wearing women's jeans and a purple blouse, the words died in his throat.
Well,
Marcus said after a long pause.
This is interesting.
You've been putting estrogen in my coffee, James stated, his voice oddly steady. For months. Marcus set down his overnight bag and leaned against the counter.
I have.
Why? You know why, after what you did with Elise. Ah, so this was about revenge. 6 months earlier, James had briefly dated Marcus's ex-girlfriend after they'd broken up. It had been a mistake, one that had strained their friendship, though they'd eventually reached an uneasy reconciliation. Or so James had thought. This is how you get back at me? By changing my body? Marcus shrugged.
It started as a joke. I figured you'd notice the taste after a few days and ask about it. When you didn't, I got curious how far it would go. You couldn't have known how I'd react. What if I'd had a medical emergency? I researched the dosage carefully, and I watched you closely.
Marcus studied him.
But I have to say, I didn't expect this.
He gestured at James's outfit.
You're leaning into it.
James looked down at his hands, noticing how his nails had grown longer.
I don't understand it either, but when I realized what was happening, something clicked, like a key in a lock I didn't know existed.
Marcus moved to sit across from him at the table.
So, you're not going to report me to the police?
James laughed, a sound that came out higher than his old laugh.
I probably should. What you did was beyond wrong, but...
He trailed off, struggling to articulate the strange gratitude mingled with his anger. I think you accidentally helped me discover something about myself. That you like being a woman? That maybe I was supposed to be one all along. The confession hung in the air between them, the first time James had allowed himself to fully form the thought.
So, what now?
Marcus asked.
I don't know,
James admitted.
I need time to figure this out, but I'm not drinking any more of your coffee.
Marcus nodded.
Fair enough.
That conversation marked the beginning of James's conscious transition. The hormonal changes continued naturally as he consulted medical professionals and began legitimate hormone therapy. His blonde hair grew longer, falling past his shoulders in soft waves. He legally changed his name to Felicity, feeling the crisp newness of identity with each signature on the paperwork. By month 3, Felicity had embraced her new life fully. Her wardrobe consisted entirely of women's clothing, pink blouses, pencil skirts, dresses in various cuts that flattered her increasingly feminine figure. She'd developed a preference for modest makeup that enhanced her features without looking overdone. Her voice had settled into a higher register through dedicated practice. Marcus continued as her roommate, their relationship evolving into something more complex than friendship, but less fraught than before. He never apologized explicitly for what he'd done, and Felicity never directly forgave him. Their shared secret created a bond neither had anticipated.
Do you ever miss being James?
Marcus asked one evening as they shared dinner in their apartment. Felicity considered the question, twirling pasta around her fork. Sometimes I miss the simplicity. Being a woman in this world comes with complications I never had to think about before. But do I miss being James? No. It's like asking if I miss wearing shoes that were 3 sizes too small. Work presented its own challenges. Felicity had taken a month's leave to focus on her transition, using accumulated vacation time and vague references to medical issues to explain her absence. When she returned, it was with her new name, new wardrobe, and new identity. The company's HR department had been surprisingly supportive, helping manage the transition with her team. Still, the whispers followed her through the hallways, and some colleagues clearly struggled to reconcile the James they'd known with the Felicity before them. Donna, her cubicle neighbor, proved to be an unexpected ally. "I like your dress," she said on Felicity's first day back, referring to the navy blue wrap dress with white polka dots that Felicity had carefully selected for her return. "That color works well with your blonde hair." "Thank you," Felicity replied, relief flooding through her at this simple acknowledgement. "Listen," Donna continued, lowering her voice. "Some of the guys are being idiots about all this. If you need someone to have lunch with or just talk, I'm here." Felicity smiled, feeling a genuine connection forming. "I'd like that." Over lunch in the company cafeteria, away from curious eyes, Felicity found herself opening up. "The strangest part is how right it feels," she confided, picking at her salad. "Like I've been walking with a pebble in my shoe my whole life, and suddenly it's gone." Donna nodded, thoughtfully. "I have a cousin who transitioned a few years ago. She now, said something similar, that it wasn't about becoming someone new, but finally being who she always was." "Exactly," Felicity agreed, feeling understood. "Though my path here wasn't exactly conventional." "How so?" Felicity hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about Marcus's prank and its unexpected outcome. "Let's just say life has a strange way of giving us what we need, even when we don't know we need it." As weeks passed, Felicity settled into her new reality. The initial stares and whispers at work faded as her transition became old news. Her body continued to change, hips widening, facial features softening further, muscle mass redistributing. She scheduled consultations for more permanent procedures, considering her options carefully. Her relationship with Marcus remained complicated. He'd stopped making her coffee altogether, a silent acknowledgement of boundaries restored. They existed in a strange symbiosis. His violation had launched her journey, yet her embracing of it had absolved him of some guilt. "I have a date tomorrow," Felicity announced one evening, 6 months into her new life. She wore a green blouse tucked into black slacks, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Marcus looked up from his laptop.
"Yeah? With who?" "His name is Daniel. He works in marketing at the firm across the street. We met at that networking event last week."
"Does he know about... before?" Felicity shook her head.
"Not yet. I figure I'll tell him if things progress. It's just coffee for now." "And you're okay with that? Dating men?"
She considered the question. Her attraction had shifted somewhat during her transition, or perhaps it had always been there, merely suppressed.
"I'm open to connections wherever they form. Gender matters less than the person."
The date with Daniel went well. He was attentive, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts. Over cappuccinos in a quiet corner cafe, Felicity found herself relaxing into the interaction, enjoying the simple pleasure of being seen as the woman she now was.
"I'd like to see you again,"
Daniel said as they parted outside the cafe. Felicity smiled. "I'd like that too." 3 dates later, as their connection deepened, she knew it was time for disclosure. They sat in a park, watching ducks glide across a small pond, when she gathered her courage. "There's something you should know about me," she began, her fingers nervously adjusting the sleeve of her lavender cardigan. Daniel turned to her, expression open. "I'm listening." "I'm transgender. I've been living as Felicity for about 7 months now." She watched his face carefully, prepared for the range of possible reactions. Disgust, anger, fetishization, or worst of all, violence disguised as calm before he walked away. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me. That must have taken courage." "You're not surprised?" "A little," he admitted. "But I've noticed certain things. The way you sometimes seem to be learning how to navigate certain feminine spaces or interactions. I figured you might be trans." Felicity felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "And you're okay with it?" "I'm still getting to know you, Felicity. This is one part of your story, but it doesn't define everything about who you are." He reached for her hand. "I'd like to keep discovering the rest, if you'll let me." Their relationship progressed naturally from there. Daniel was patient as Felicity continued her journey, offering support without trying to guide her choices. He attended medical consultations when asked, offered opinions on outfits when solicited, but never presumed to know better than she did what her transition should look like. 1 year after the bitter coffee first crossed her lips, Felicity stood in front of her full-length mirror, taking stock. Her blonde hair cascaded past her shoulders, framing a face that had lost most of its masculine angles. Her figure was unmistakably feminine now, curves in all the expected places. She wore a red dress that hugged her waist and flared at the hips, an outfit that would have been unimaginable in her previous life. Marcus appeared in the doorway of her bedroom.
"Daniel's here,"
he announced.
"You look nice."
"Thanks," she replied, reaching for her purse. "Don't wait up. I might stay at his place tonight." As she passed Marcus in the doorway, she paused. "I've been thinking about moving out," she said. "Daniel and I have been talking about getting a place together." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Relief? Regret? "That makes sense. You two seem good together." "We are, and I think I need to move forward." "Completely." He understood her meaning immediately. Their arrangement had served its purpose, but the daily reminder of how her journey began had become an anchor to a past she was ready to release.
I get it,
he said simply.
No hard feelings.
She nodded, appreciating his understanding. I never did thank you, you know.
For poisoning your coffee,
he asked, with a wry smile. For accidentally setting me on the path to becoming who I really am. She adjusted her dress.
What you did was wrong on every level, but the outcome.
She gestured at herself.
I can't regret where I've ended up. So we're even? For the Elise thing?
Felicity laughed.
More than even, I'd say.
But yes, ancient history now. The doorbell rang again. Daniel, growing impatient.
You should go,
Marcus said.
Your date's waiting.
Felicity nodded and turned to leave, then paused one last time. The funny thing is, I never liked coffee. I only drank it because everyone at the office did, and I thought I needed to fit in. And now? Now I drink tea. I don't need to pretend anymore. With that, she walked out to greet Daniel, leaving behind not just her apartment, but the last vestiges of a life that had never quite fit. The bitter taste of those morning coffees had faded from memory, replaced by the sweetness of authenticity. 6 months later, Felicity and Daniel moved into their own apartment, a bright space with windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. Her blonde hair gleamed in the sunshine as she arranged her extensive wardrobe in their shared closet. Dresses, blouses, skirts, all carefully selected to flatter her figure and express her personality. She maintained minimal contact with Marcus, an occasional text message or social media interaction, but no more. That chapter had closed naturally, leaving her free to write the rest of her story without the shadow of how it began. At work, she had been promoted to team leader, her confidence and emotional intelligence recognized as valuable assets. Colleagues who had once whispered now sought her advice. The woman she had become was more assured, more authentic, and ultimately more successful than the man she had pretended to be.
Do you ever think about the bizarre coincidence?
Daniel asked one evening as they prepared dinner in their kitchen. If your roommate hadn't been so vindictive, I might never have discovered this part of myself, Felicity finished, stirring the pasta sauce. She wore comfortable jeans and a soft pink sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. I've thought about that a lot. I think eventually I would have figured it out, but who knows how long it might have taken or what form it might have taken.
Fate works in strange ways,
Daniel observed, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Fate and pharmaceutical-grade estrogen, she quipped, but leaned back into his embrace nonetheless. Later that night, as Daniel slept beside her, Felicity reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From bitter coffee to authentic living, from confusion to clarity, from James to Felicity, the path had been unexpected, but ultimately right. She never did confront Marcus directly about the spiked coffee. Some truths were better left acknowledged, but unspoken. Besides, what would be the point? To express anger over the violation, only to then admit gratitude for the outcome? The contradiction was too complex to resolve neatly. Instead, she had chosen to focus on the future. Next month, she would begin the surgical procedures she had carefully researched and saved for. Daniel supported her decisions, but emphasized they didn't matter to him either way. He loved her as she was. In quiet moments, Felicity sometimes wondered about parallel universes, one where she never drank the bitter coffee, where James continued living a half-life of unrecognized dysphoria, or one where she had reacted with rage rather than curiosity when she discovered the truth. pursuing legal action against Marcus, and rejecting the changes rather than embracing them. How different her life might have been in those other realities. How much emptier, how much less authentic. The blonde woman who now slept peacefully beside the man who loved her completely. This was who she was meant to be all along. It had taken a vengeful roommate, bitter coffee, and extraordinary courage to bring her into being, but Felicity regretted none of it. The bitter taste had yielded the sweetest outcome imaginable, freedom to be herself, wholly and without reservation. And for that, strange as it seemed, she would always be grateful for that first sip of tainted coffee and everything that followed.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!